Welcome back to class. Today we will talk about punishment.
The punishment is a natural phenomenon. It happens often in our lives, and punishment is one of the basic principles of operant conditioning, but it is poorly understood, frequently misapplied, and its application can be controversial. Many people think that punishment is punishing a person. However, punishment is not about punishing the person. Punishment is a response consequence contingency that suppresses the future frequency of similar responses.
Like reinforcement, punishment is a two-term behavior and consequence functional relation defined by its effects on the future frequency of behavior. Punishment has occurred when a response is followed immediately by a stimulus change that decreases the future frequency of similar responses. So, the decrease in the future frequency of the occurrence of the behavior is the key to describe punishment.
Like reinforcement, punishment can be described in two types. First one is positive punishment. Positive punishment occurs when the presentation of a stimulus immediately following a behavior results in a decrease in the frequency of the behavior. Negative punishment involves the termination of an already present stimulus immediately following a behavior that results in a decrease in the future frequency of the behavior. Here's a summary table for you. When we say positive, that means we present some stimuli. When we say negative, we remove some stimuli to decrease or increase the frequency of behavior. Punishment is to decrease the frequency of undesired behavior. So when we say positive punishment, we present some aversive stimuli or stimulus to decrease the frequency of a undesired behavior. When we say negative punishment, we remove some pleasant stimuli or stimulus to decrease the frequency of a behavior. Well, positive punishments and negative reinforcement are frequently confused because aversive events are associated with the positive punishments and with negative reinforcement, right? However, negative reinforcement is not a punishment. Now, let's briefly talk about some examples of positive punishment and negative punishment that are being used in education setting. The first one is reprimands. The delivery of verbal reprimands following the occurrence of misbehavior, problem behavior, is an example of attempted positive punishment. The second example is response blocking. In recent research, physically intervening as soon as the person begins to emit the problem behavior to prevent or block the completion of the response has been shown to be effective in reducing the frequency of some problem behavior. So that's response blocking. However, in real life, if you want to use response blocking as your intervention strategy, you must use this with great care because response blocking, this can result in some side effects like emotional harm and many other side effects. Now let's talk about some examples of negative punishment. Negative punishment occurs in two ways: timeout from positive reinforcement or response cost. The first one is timeout from positive reinforcement. We can simply call it timeout. This strategy is defined as a withdrawal of the opportunity to earn positive reinforcement or the loss of access to positive reinforcers for a specified time contingent on the occurrence of a behavior. There are two types of timeout.
non exclusion, and exclusion. In exclusion timeout, a person is completely removed from the environment for a specified time, contingent on the occurrence of the targeted inappropriate behavior. So instead of using exclusion timeout, in education field, we prefer to use non exclusion timeout. In non exclusion timeout, the person is not completely removed physically from the time in setting, although the person's position relative to that setting shifts, he or she remains within that environment. While using non-exclusion timeout, you can use or embed several procedures or strategy together, such as planned ignoring and contingent observation. To use a timeout more effectively, you can consider several things. Your text provide really helpful information. I want to introduce several things. The first one, you should create reinforcing and enriching the timing environment. So timing environment must be reinforcing if timeout is to be effective. In making the time in environment reinforcing, you should seek ways to reinforce behaviors that are alternative or incompatible with behaviors that lead to timeout. So for example, you can use differential reinforcement of alternate behavior, differential reinforcement of incomparable behavior, DRA, DRI. We'll talk about those strategy in 2 weeks. So you can use differential reinforcement strategy together. So these differential reinforcement strategy will facilitate the development of appropriate behavior. And upon return from timeout, reinforcement for appropriate behavior must be delivered as quickly as possible. So you will use timeout with, you can use timeout with reinforcement. The second example of negative punishment is response cost. Response cost is a form of punishment in which the loss of a specific amount of reinforcement occurs contingent on inappropriate behavior and results in the decreased probability of the future occurrence of the behavior. So, if the future frequency of the punished behavior is reduced by the response contingent withdrawal of a positive reinforcer, then response cost has occurred. So, response cost usually involves the loss of reinforcers like money, token, sticker, or activity time, free time, such things. So, it's like a fine. If you want to use punishment, please remember there are some possible side effects associated with using punishment, like escape or avoidance. So, like if you present aversive stimuli, then escape, avoidance, that's kind of a natural reaction, right? And your student may gain some emotional trauma with punishment, and then punishment alone may not be sufficient to teach your students what to do, like appropriate behavior, right? So you can combine with reinforcement schedule or strategies to teach what to do, like appropriate alternative behaviors. In the next few slides, I summarize the guideline for using punishment effectively, so please skim through and remember those guidelines before you use punishment.
Conclusion: punishment is a natural part of life. Well, we're seeing positive and negative punishments naturally in our daily life. However, if you want to deliver punishments for your student in your classroom, you should be very careful and you should develop systematic plan for that. And when you deliver those interventions, you should follow the plan systematically. And when you develop plan, please make sure that you consider the ethics and ethical guideline for punishments I provide in previous slides. And you should be very careful when you deliver that interventions. Well, many people, including teachers and behavioralists, they don't recommend to use punishment in education field. There are so many possible reasons, but one of the reasons is this. There are not many research on punishment, and the research and resources we are using are very old. There are more than 40 years old. So there must be more recent research on punishment, and there must be better guideline for use of punishment in education field.